Hey up, and welcome to episode F of the Temple of Blair podcast. This is yet another History of Roadrunner Records entry. You'll notice I've been pumping these out the last couple of days. It turns out I had a backlog of these interviews which needed editing and pumping out, so you're likely to see a few more coming over the next few days. This episode is Kyle Thomas of Exhorder and Floodgate fame. He's also in Alabama Thunder Pussy and Trouble, but we're only focusing on the two Roadrunner staples for this interview. Kyle was incredibly accommodating with his time, in which we looked at the relationship between Exhorder and Floodgate and Roadrunner Records, and I had a bit of a fanboy moment about Alabama Thunder Pussy, who are pretty much one of my favourite sort of stoner southern rock bands. With regards to Kyle and Roadrunner Records, he had 3 albums on the label: Slaughter in the Vatican and The Law with Exhorder, and Penalty with Floodgate. You'll notice as well that Exhorder are back together, and they recently released Mourn the Southern Skies on Nuclear Blast, I believe, last year. Nonetheless, you're going to really enjoy it. I did. Thanks again, Kyle. 1, 2, fuck shit up. Everything is stable and happy. How are you, man?
I'm well. How about yourself?
Yeah. So I've just come off a long day at work, so just learning to roll with it at the minute. Everything all right after
coffee or cocktail in that cup?
Oh, I've got black coffee here, I've got water over there, and I've got Diet Coke as a backup.
Cheers. Here's my black coffee, your black coffee.
Cheers, buddy. Everything all right after Zeta?
Yeah, it was really pretty hairy to ride it out. Normally, my wife and I have a rule that if it gets to when it starts looking like category 2 is going to become category 3, we plan on getting out. The problem with this storm was it was very fast moving, and out of nowhere and completely unanticipated, it exploded into a category 3 from a category 1. They were at first thinking it was just going to be a mild 1, barely out of tropical storm stage, but something about the warm water it liked. So now that was the bad news about it being fast. The good news about it being fast was it rolled right through here in a matter of hours, and it was throwing so much water around, and the winds were like 120 miles an hour. So the damage would have been extensive, and the flooding would have been bad if it was moving, say, 4 miles an hour. But it cruised through at about 21 miles an hour. So it was really fast moving for a storm. Sometimes even this tropical storms, when they're smaller and they sit over you in a slow moving pace, they're just dumping water. And it's, for a city like New Orleans, it's below sea level. That's a recipe for disaster.
Well, I'm glad everything's all right. As you say, you only had some minor damage to your roof, right?
Yeah, it wasn't much. It's something that's an easy fix that I'll probably either never do or I'll wait till like 2 years from now when it's a real problem.
Cool. Okay, I'm gonna jump straight into it because I know are you teaching after this?
No. I'm open today, so you got plenty of time here.
Okay, cool. So the project is the History of Roadrunner Records, and effectively I've been asking everyone that's been associated with the label for the last 30 odd years what their experiences were, because it's kind of for me it's quite interesting. A lot of labels are either giant monolithic beasts which have no narrative or context, like your big EMIs or your Sonys and things like that, and there's some tiny ones like your Combats and your Shatter Records and Shrapnel who just come straight in and burn out very quickly. But Roadrunner did something else. It kind of maintained its individuality for a good 25 years before it all started to, I won't say fall apart, but they started to lose indie cred, I guess. So I thought it was worth trying to establish a bit of a narrative there. And Exhorder and Floodgate are part of that narrative. But I'll open with an apology because I could have seen Alabama Thunder Pussy in Sheffield Corporation in the summer of 2008. But but I missed it because it was my mate's birthday party.
Yeah, and it's probably not a bad thing that you missed that one, because I was extremely under the weather and I almost didn't perform that show at all.
Wow.
And I think I had strep throat, very, very bad case of strep throat, and fever. I couldn't swallow anything. So, getting medicine down or, fluids was really difficult. And I really ended up sounding like a raped seal. It was terrible. But I powered through at least 5 or 6 songs just to, give the people something. It was, we came a long way to play the show, and people came out probably on a weeknight.
I think it was a Saturday, which is why I was doubly gutted.
Oh, really?
I think it was. Yeah, I remember it being, this is like a golden opportunity, but I was like, I must have been 18 and had no money, and I was already at the barbecue or something like that.
Yeah, now I feel even worse that it was a Saturday night. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. That's one of the perils of being, especially a singer or a drummer on tours. Your instrument is your body.
Yeah.
So if it's compromised in any way, it really makes for a difficult performance.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've written it out as 13 questions related to yourself and Roadrunner and Exhorder and Floodgate and all that good stuff. But really, we can deal with it chronologically. We can go in and out of things, and we can interrogate things as we go along.
Sure, at your lead.
Yeah, man. So I guess it starts with Three Cherries, right? There was a label called Three Cherries, which Borovoj Kurjan was involved with. Now, Borovoj is a guy who keeps cropping up in this story, but I can never pin him down to exactly what he does. So it was interesting to see him there.
Bori doesn't do anything. Borovoy, I think he really got his start as a journalist, and then he moved into the A&R field. When we first started talking with him, he was representing Three Cherries. Three Cherries had started a fledgling subsidiary called Mean Machine Records. Mm-hmm. And I think Mean Machine had signed Machine Head right before us. We were in consideration for the very first signing to Mean Machine, and so was Machine Head, but not Machine Head, Violence.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, because Machine Head came well after. It was Violence.
Yeah.
My timeline gets foggy, so
it's cool.
Just crack me upside the head if so. But they were talking with us, and at the time, the Exhorder wasn't even a complete unit. We had been broken up. The first breakup of the band occurred in early 1988, I think, maybe like January, February of 1988. Okay. And they started talking with Mean Machine before Chris and I had returned to the band. And along the way, we signed with them. We started recording an album. They had given us, very small budget, even for back then. And so we were just doing our best. We had already done the Slaughter in the Vatican demo and the Get Rude demo prior to that. And really what we wanted to do was release the Slaughter in the Vatican demo. We recorded that at Ultrasonic Studios here. Later down the line, Down NOLA was recorded there. So it was a very good, reputable studio in town here. And for whatever reason, the powers that be decided that we needed to start the album over completely from scratch. So we felt like it didn't really get the right feel. We had nightmares with guitar tones, drum tones, all this
is
stuff.
This Three Cherries that are calling that shot, or is this?
Yes, that was Three Cherries.
Okay.
And so midway through the recording session, Three Cherries, I guess, goes bankrupt and decides to fold and shut down the subsidiary in the process. So what happened was Road Racer at the time had a smaller subsidiary called RC Records that was more specialized to thrash and death metal.
Right. Okay.
Specifically, and really death metal was just starting to develop, but thrash was still big at the time. So then we came along to that. But before I get ahead of myself, Borovoy was the one that was our A&R guy, basically, between Mean Machine and the band. And when Road Racer RC took over the contract, then Monty Connor became our A&R guy. So that's the chronology there.
So was Mean Machine acquired by Roadrunner, or was Borovoy just saying, "Hey Monty, you might want to pick these lads up"?
They just sold the contract off. There was no absorption of that, not to my knowledge. It was just, here, we're going to sell you this contract.
Okay. I found that quite, when I was reading up on that, I heard about the demo, you wanting to have the demo out as the album and then being told to re-record it. And I found it interesting because I read it as Roadrunner asked you to do that. And historically, Case has gone to bands and asked to put out a demo as an album, as like, I guess, a cost-cutting exercise. So I was thinking, oh, that's a bit of a change of pace. But obviously, if it's Three Cherries that made that decision, then it doesn't quite fit my theory. Did you have any relationship with Monty prior to?
No, we met Monty after we signed, well, while we were in the process of signing with Road Racer at the time.
Yeah. What was your impression of him?
I always loved Monty as a person. I think he's genuine, without a doubt. He has, over the years, he has become a friend. He's been more of a friend to me than he ever needed to be, and also always very fair in a business situation. Now, that's not to say that we've always agreed on what needs to be done to get the job done, but he's very knowledgeable. His track record speaks for itself, and like I said, an even better person.
Yeah, I mean, the more I hear about him, the more I kind of get the impression that he's not so much an A&R guy. He's more just a professional metalhead. He's paid to just be a good metalhead, and then everything.
Yeah, I mean, he
benefits.
He knows what he likes, and most of the time he's right. Sometimes he's not, but nobody's ever, 100% accurate at anything that they do. So, just the simple fact that he is such a gigantic music fan, he's got a really, really great instinct for being able to spot what's good and what's going to, potentially blow up into something bigger.
Yeah. Did you ever get the chance to meet Case?
I did meet Case a couple of times, yes.
Oh, cool. How did you find him?
Really, we only sat down maybe twice and had discussions. There was a funny thing. We had always kind of joked amongst ourselves back in the beginning that there was a rumor that had gone around that Case Wessels was just a kind of a pen name for King Diamond. We thought that some kind of way King Diamond owned Roadrunner back then, and I don't think we started that idea on ourselves. Somebody put that idea in our head, and it just kind of grew. And I never met him while we were in Exhorder, but when Monty was courting Penalty, which became Floodgate, I went to New York on a trip to spend time with him there and just see the label, and he really wanted me to sign with Roadrunner, and I had a bad experience with Roadrunner with Exhorder, so I was not really too thrilled about it. But I went there and sat down at a meeting with Monty and Case, and when we finally were officially introduced, I shook his hand. I said, "Well, now I can officially say that I know for sure that you're not King Diamond." And he kind of like looked at me, and Monty laughed because he knew the story. So he asked me to tell Case the story, and he had a chuckle about it, and that was it. But the only other time I really interacted with him was at a show in Rotterdam when Floodgate was touring with Sepultura.
Yeah. To be fair, mate, I've never seen Case and King Diamond in the same room, so who knows?
The jury's still out, right?
Yeah, man. And we'll get to how we got there with Floodgate and presumably the obstacles they had to overcome to get you back after the experience. But I'm interested in I'm interested in really boring things. So I'm going to try and pitch to you the model Roadrunner contract. So actually, I best clear that up first. So when you say Three Cherries kind of sold the contract onto Roadrunner, did Roadrunner come in with another advance, another arrangement, or was it just black and white, word for word, the Three Cherries contract, but with Roadrunner on the top, or Road Racer, or whatever? Yeah.
I know we signed a second contract,
Right.
so at the time I was not the one in the band that was dealing with the business side of it. I think at this time I was 19, and I was really more or less interested in the next beer I was getting handed, getting loaded, talking to a girl. That was really my priority. And working on music, of course. That always kind of seems to fall in there with a with a musician's agenda at some point. But I do remember we signed another contract, which tells me that, the original contract had been augmented in several ways. It had to be. So, more than likely the term was probably tweaked. I know that we went over budget with what the Three Cherries contract stipulated. So Roadrunner did, continue to fund the project until it was done. It went over budget from what it was originally supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I'd be shocked if we spent $10,000 on it. I don't think we did.
I'll run the model contract by you, and if you think it's somewhat familiar, great. And if not, it might just be kind of fun to hear. So the model contract tends to be for 6 to 7 albums, maybe 8.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. An option after the second or the third, depending on who it is. Roughly, usually the advance is about $5,000. Yeah. All intellectual property and publishing is retained by Roadrunner in perpetuity, forever and ever.
Of course.
No guaranteed touring support. So they typically put you on the road, but they wouldn't guarantee the support on the basis that you might get given a shit gig, and they don't want to support that.
You're going to give me PTSD today.
Sorry, man. If there's anything you don't want to talk about, you can just shut me up.
No, it's fine. I lived it, and look, it's a great story. It is, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah.
That's all pretty spot on.
I guess at the time, I was speaking to Andy Saunders yesterday. He was one of the A&R guys at the UK office in the early 90s, maybe even through your time as well. And he said it's usually that contract's really good for kids of, say, 19, 20, who...
Sure.
And when someone comes to them and says, "Oh yeah, Sepultura, King Diamond, yeah, we'll get you on the road with them," it's a really easy thing to sign that dotted line, but it takes a solicitor, a lawyer, or someone to go, "Fucking what? No, do not sign up for this." But still,
now we did have an attorney negotiate that contract, and in turn, he actually negotiated this. He's currently still the Exhorder counsel, and he negotiated the deal with Nuclear Blast as well. I'm sure he's come as long of a way in 30 something years as we have. We're happy with the way he represents us. So, but yeah, he worked that contract pretty hard, if I remember properly, accurately rather.
I mean, it kept you busy for 2 years.
We were busy. We weren't as busy as we probably should have been, but there were a lot of factors into that prevented us from being a band that just beat down the road relentlessly. First and foremost, Chris, our drummer, Chris Nail, was enrolled in Louisiana State University on a scholarship. So he did the smart right thing for himself and stayed in school. So really we would go out and do regional shows as much as we could, to where he, as long as he could get away, we'd go do it. But we, like Slaughter in the Vatican, we did not even do a proper United States tour. we went to Europe for a month in March, like late February and most of March in 1991. So really the album came out in October of 90, and we really didn't do a proper tour until then. And even then, it was a very, very small booking agency in Europe. The guy who owned it was also the tour manager, the roadie, he was one of the drivers because we had 2 vehicles. And I mean, he worked really, really hard, but I think he was just an uber fan who had the means and the funds to do tours for bands. And literally we were playing like really small clubs and youth centers. We would pull into the countryside, a long driveway in the countryside, and get out at the venue and step out of the van, and there would be like a herd of sheep standing right there, and you got to like encourage them to move so you can get out. And we'd never seen any of this stuff. We're suburban / city guys from New Orleans. We're not out in the country going, what is this? And the shows sometimes they'd fill up pretty nicely, sometimes not so much. I mean, we were still a pretty new band, but we didn't care. We were on tour in Europe, and we had all the beer we could drink, and fried garbage foods. It was a great time in my life.
Yeah. Did Roadrunner ever get involved in the production of Slaughter in the Vatican, in that they're trying to give notes? You mentioned guitar tone earlier. Did they influence that, or was it kind of like just the perils of production?
Monty actually came down. I think he was unhappy with the way the sessions were sounding, so he came down to Tampa. We were really on a low budget. We were staying in like seedy motels. I remember that some of them were really, really bad. And it was just working during the day and drinking in the night in these crappy hotels. And basically with the budget we had and the inexperience that we had, Scott Burns did his best to try and convey a good production onto basically a session that he didn't start, and that's kind of a nightmare. I've talked with Max Norman about that, with, like, for instance, the difference in the sound between Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. Max took over that session from Chris Sangdareeds, so he didn't start that session. That's why it sounds drastically different from Diary of a Madman.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened, I guess, with Slaughter in the Vatican. In a way, is we started out with an engineer here in New Orleans with the sessions that we were doing for Slaughter in the Vatican, and we didn't really have a producer working with us. It was just us. So they just basically took everything that we had, and really we just didn't have good tones to start with. So we ended up re-recording all the guitar tones, and then we realized that the drum tones were bad. So we kind of like retweaked the drum mix with Trickery in the studio, and determined that wasn't good either. So then Chris comes along and re-records the drum tracks completely, overdubs them with nobody playing guitar, like literally to the guitar parts. There's no click track on these sessions. So the fact that Chris did this was incredible. I remember Tom Morris, the owner of Morris Sound Studios, standing in the console room watching Chris overdub this album to this crazy music and just going, how is this dude doing this? But it's what we had to do. And even then there were complications with the drum tones. So there's drum samples on that album. There were samples taken from Beneath the Remains of Sepultura. That snare sound on Slaughter in the Vatican, for the most part on that album, is the same one that Igor had on Sepultura's Beneath the Remains. It's kind of weird.
Wow.
So yeah, we just did the best we could. Monty came down. I'm kind of taking the long route to get to the answer, but Monty came down and got involved in the mixing sessions, and mostly as an observer. On occasion, Monty likes to get hands on, so that's okay. At the end of the day, you either keep what happens, or you change it. And Scott Burns is really, really a great engineer as well as producer. He knew a hell of a lot more than we did, so we followed his lead. The end result wasn't what we had hoped, but I have learned to be a little more forgiving to it today for what it is, and mostly because of how other people look at it. The fans love that album. It's been inducted into the Decibel Hall of Fame. It is to this day the most popular item that we have. That it just gets the most love, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, not to
what it is.
Not to blow smoke up your ass, but I didn't know there was a problem with it until I started reading the background. You know what I mean? I listened to the demo comparison.
I think it misrepresents what we were, especially as a live band.
Yeah.
The whole thing about Exhorder is, from start to finish, it's always been, people walk away from our shows going, that wasn't just a concert, that was an experience. And that's something that we always took pride in. I think a lot of that came from us being really almost more of a punk band in attitude and presence than we were a metal band. We were embraced by the punk community before we were embraced by the metal community in New Orleans. So that really helped us with gaining that mindset. We learned a lot playing with punk bands and playing at punk shows, and we still hold a lot of that principle to our standard this day. And it's just always been, our shows were always, all the bands that came up behind us, we were the band to play with. You wanted an opening slot with Exhorder. We took Crowbar under our wing. We took I Hate God under our wing. We took Soil and Green under our wing. And there was so many bands from New Orleans that, I'm not taking credit for what they've done, because Lord knows every single one of those bands worked harder and longer than we ever did after the fact. But it was a great launch pad for anybody looking to jumpstart their career.
It sounds like it was a strong community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our fan base was kind of like in that old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer holiday special. It was kind of like the island of misfit toys. We, with open arms, we welcomed anyone and everyone, no matter who you were, no matter what you were about, from start to finish. You could come to our show, have a good time, and not worry about getting hassled. And if people hassled you for no good reason, we got them out of there. It was, but if you started trouble, we also got you out.
You get more of an idea of Exhorder as a unit from the demo than the album. I think that's what you're referring to when you're saying that's where the mix didn't quite deliver on, even though it does sound shit hot and it's an awesome album. That's what you wanted it to speak to, the unit, the actual Exhorder experience, as opposed to here's perfectly sonically crafted layer after layer after layer. That doesn't matter if you've got a tour de force band behind it.
Yeah, really. In all honesty, the demo was raw. I think the demo captured our live feel better than anything that we did before or after. It wasn't perfect, but to this day, like the old purists from New Orleans, they'll tell you that's the best. That's their favorite era of the band, that original lineup on that album, on that demo rather. And I don't know, the Slaughter in the Vatican album is more templated like the early death metal, especially the Tampa death metal, like Obituary and Death and Deicide. It's very kind of in that mold, production wise.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't really us, but it served its purpose and it got our music heard. And the only other thing I could think to do at this point would be to either do a re-release of the demo properly or re-record the whole album again from start to finish. And I don't want to do that. I really don't. I'd rather write new music.
I reckon these days you could get the demo, just put it online and say, okay, guys, this is now an open source project. With take the digital tracks and remaster it yourself. I'll see you in 6 months and see what people come up with. I guess that would be an option, but I'm not going to tell you how to approach it.
Sure.
Do you know why Scott Burns? What you mentioned, obviously, the death metal sound of the template. That's because the Roadrunner death metal factory was about to really come into full flow at that time. So it's no surprise that that's the template that was fit. But do you know why Roadrunner opted for Scott Burns at the time?
It may have been that he was just the hot hand at the time, and they were having a lot of success with him.
Yeah.
So, and plus Tampa is, not terribly far from here. It's about an 8 to 9 hour drive now. Back then, when the highways were 55 miles per hour instead of 70, it was more like a 12 to 13 hour haul, especially when we were pulling a trailer full of gear. It was a pretty long ride, but it was attainable. We could pile in. I mean, anybody in New Orleans, Louisiana, most likely hopped in a car with their parents and went down to Disney World in Orlando, which is not far from Tampa. So for us, it was just, we'll just ride down there. Yeah. Crazy. I went to jail when we were recording that album in Tampa.
What did you do?
Something really stupid that I didn't think at the time was a big deal. We had just gotten out of bed and ready to head to the studio, and there was a Burger King in between our Roach Motel and the studio. So we got in the drive-through, got back out to get on the street, and we're at the red light, and I looked down and I saw a street sign for the intersection, 52nd Street and Fowler Street or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And I remember Fowler, and I saw it, and it was on the ground, and I went, that would look great in the practice room. So I opened the door, jumped out, grabbed the sign, got back in the van. Well, as soon as I did, whoever was driving looked in the rearview mirror and went, there's 2 cop cars behind us. And I went, well, that's just garbage anyway. It's just laying there broken on the street. And they're like, guys are like, I don't know, man. Let's see what happens. So we turned out onto the first street. Basically, we needed to make a right and a left, and then we were at the studio, literally right there. And and so as soon as we got to the second light and made the turn to go into Morris Sound, the lights came on, the police lights. So I was like, oh shit, so we get out, and the police come up, and they're like, y'all know why we pulled us over? And everybody at the time before that was like, everybody just played dumb and we'll just let it unravel.
19 years old.
So everybody's like, no, why? And he's like, well, we saw one of y'all jump out and steal that street sign back over there. And I remember him looking at everybody. Did anybody in this van do that? And I'm not going to say any names, but one guy right away looked dead in this guy's face, the cop's face, and just went, no. And everybody else just kind of stood there quiet. And the cop said, all right, I mean, if whoever did this isn't going to step up, then I'm going to have to take you all to jail. And right there, I just went, it was me. I said, but I didn't know that it was like city property or anything. It looked broken, and I just thought it would look good in our practice room. So he said, all right, well, just come back over here by the car, and we're talking. And then the guy said, they're watching me talk. And then all of a sudden they see him ask me to put my hands behind my back. And it's like, shit. So yeah, I went to jail. I was I was there probably. I didn't make it past the holding tank. I was there
Right.
for maybe 8 hours. The one and only time in my life I went to jail. I don't know how that happened, but literally the only time I ever went to jail. And they bailed me out later on in the afternoon, and so that's where part of the budget for the
Yeah.
recording of the album went.
Monty's on the phone going, "This is going to be great press. Let me just get on the phone with
Right.
Karam." Yeah.
Well, there wasn't much else. There wasn't much else. Honestly, we were ugly as pig shit. We didn't have, our image was no image. And that was the punk rock side of us. We're us. And Monty told us, he was like, man, we had nothing to market off of you guys other than the fact that y'all were violent people. That's really how we marketed y'all. It was just, they're uncontrollable. And most of the time he was right. We were uncontrollable.
You mentioned Monty was hands-on in the studio when he came down. Obviously wanted to check out the mixes. Sometimes he's got himself an exec producer credit on some albums. Obviously not this one, but it's good to know he likes to get stuck in. Do you know where did the album cover come from?
Oh, well, the original album cover was supposed to be the demo, of course, which was, I don't know if you've ever seen that cover.
Yeah. The cardinal.
It's not just a pope. It's actually Pope John Paul II, who is now better known as Saint Paul, Saint John Paul II. So
extra heresy.
Perhaps the most beloved pope, if not ever, definitely of the modern era. And we hanged him from our logo with the Vatican burning in the background and women and children crying and praying at his feet. It's really disturbingly horrendous. And so Roadrunner said, no go. We can't have that. There's no way. You'll never get it in the stores.
Sure.
Like, why not? It's not real. It's just parody. We see it all the time. They're like, you can't do that to the Pope. So we're like, okay. Well, so then they hired another artist and came up somehow along the way. Another rendition was brought in with the Secret Service type agents leading the Pope to the gallows with an angry mob. And in retrospect, because the album's so loved, it's it's got a place in my heart. At the time, I wasn't happy with it because our vision had been altered by third party, and I wasn't happy about that. So I didn't embrace that artwork right out of the gates. But it's a classic. It is.
So once the album's recorded and released, you're in there with Roadrunner. You know Monty. Some of the personnel. Who else was at the New York office at the time, or who else were you dealing with at Roadrunner, or was it just primarily Monty in his capacity as an A&R guy?
We had press people and like people that handled radio, and so like Mark Abramson handled radio, better known as Psycho. Everyone knows Mark Psycho Abramson. I believe he oversaw radio. Sophie Diamantis did PR. Scott Givens oversaw, I think, touring and tour support. So we had a team there that we knew hands-on and we talked to fairly regularly. And like I said, I didn't really, I would do a lot of interviews. I always, as a singer, you got to do a lot of the press and PR. So other than that, I didn't really do much negotiation talks or business talks until the Floodgate days, because I ran that band, so that was my baby.
Well, the reason I ask is because I tend to have that's my blind spot, because it's easy to find the bands that were on Roadrunner and find the personnel involved, but it's the people behind the scenes which you'll just never ever hear about. So I have to always ask directly who you're speaking to, and there's some names which I recognize and some I don't. So that's really cool. Thank you. On your thanks section for slaughtering the Vatican, you say "fuck you" to Jerry Ramos for throwing us out of the King Diamond gig. Is there a story there?
There is a story there. I wasn't there that night. I was still in high school. I wanted to go, but I was still in high school, and it was a weeknight, so it was hard for me to sneak out and try to sneak in because it wasn't a nightclub. But it was a lot easier to get into nightclubs back then. I know my brother went with the other Exhorder guys and piled in a van and went to the show. My brother's a little bit older than me, and at the time, there was a lot of rivalry between certain members of Exhorder and some of the more, I guess, glam metal bands around town. So there was a legendary shirt that was worn that had "Kill the Posers" on the front.
Right.
And on the back, it had lists that said the following bands are posers. And then they had national acts listed and then local acts listed.
All right.
So
Okay.
right out the bat, that's war, that people wanting to fight. So, and part of why we were there anyway was putting out flyers for our first show that was like scheduled for a month later. We hadn't even played a show yet. This was as we were developing. And so I think Jerry Ramos, I don't know Jerry, but if I remember correctly, he might have been the promoter for that gig.
Right. Okay.
And so he got angry with some of the nonsense that went on there and threw a couple of guys out of the gig for basically just harassing people and
inciting violence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's the best of my knowledge since I was not there.
Sure. So how were things going into The Law then? Because you had Rob Beaton for that one. Is it Rob Beaton? Yes, Rob Beaton.
It is. Yes.
Was that another Roadrunner assignment, or was that a selection from your side?
Well, he was definitely their recommendation. Like at the time, we really didn't have like a black book full of people, so we relied on them greatly for providing us with any insight on who would be a good producer or what's a good studio to go to outside of New Orleans. We just didn't know. And Rob had done Heathen and Defiance, and amongst other things, he's worked with Greg Kinn, so he's done a lot of real stuff, and really good engineer, great guy. And we hit it off with him right off the bat. We really did. But again, that was another deal where we came into the studio on a $10,000 budget this time. Woo, now we're in the big leagues, right? And so we show up the first day, and the guys start experimenting with guitar tones. I couldn't believe it. I was like, shouldn't you have had your guitar tone ready to go before we got here?
Yep.
And so right off the bat, they came in with there was a BBE Sonic Maximizer and a Furman EQ that they were wanting to try because they were the hot new thing. A lot of the bands who were successful at the time were using these new outboard pieces of gear.
Right.
And so literally they rented them for the sessions, but it's just another thing where just our ignorance and inexperience got in the way. It was a bad idea to do that on studio time. That's something that should have been done months leading up prior. So so we started out with terrible guitar tones, and the only tones that came out right from square one on that album were the drums. The drums sound really good on that album.
Yeah.
And so all the music was done here, and we got to the end of the session and had, I don't know, like literally like 9 hours left of studio worth of money for studio time.
Right.
And so everybody looks at me and goes, okay, it's your turn. And we'd been in the studio for 2 weeks at this point. And I looked at them, I'm like, y'all kidding me, right? I got 9 hours to do the whole album. Like, we believe in you, man. So off I go. I did every song here in New Orleans except for Cadence of the Dirge. I recorded that one in San Francisco when we were mixing the album. We had a
Right.
few things to button up before we started mixing, and so that was the case with that song. But yeah, I recorded everything, mostly single tracked, and just kind of buckled down and closed my eyes and went for it, you know?
Mm-hmm. I heard one of the techniques these days is, just because you're mentioning laying the drums on Slaughter after the guitars. I think Josh Wilbur, he did like the most recent Lamb of God album and Trivium and a couple of others. His technique is to come in and do the guitars first and then work backwards. And I think the idea is want to avoid situations like the one you ended up in. So there's something there as early as possible, even if it's like a scratch track or something like that to work from. And then you're not completely fucked if you end up running out of time or cash. But I thought that's quite interesting. It also saves you going to the studio and then waiting a week for the drummer to finish his bit, and then you go up. But yeah,
it's tough. There's so many different ways to record albums, and
sure.
To record them without a click, the
Right.
positive with doing that is that it gives it the most organic live feel you're going to get, because the band's feeling everything. But if you have problems and you didn't record with a click track, or to a metronome, for those that don't know what a click track is, and it's just basically keeping perfect meter through the whole song, then to go back and have to do repairs is really, really tricky, because there's no eye contact when it's just sound. It's a very difficult thing to do. So it really, like, there's not one Exhorder album that was recorded in a live format. It always started out with guitars playing a scratch track along to the drummer to get the drum tracks done, and then building around that. And this last album was done with a click, so it sounds proper to me in that regard. The Slaughter and the Vatican sessions are way too fast. You listen to the demos and you listen to the album, and it was just, we were off to the races. And that's something that I've always, since that album was released, like, maintained. Like, when we were in rehearsals, I'm like, hey, y'all, we need to slow this down, because it loses the groove if you're going too fast. In my opinion, it just, some of those slow grooves that we're known for, when they're just a little too fast, it doesn't groove anymore. So that's really important. And being in the pocket, all that stuff. There's a lot of factors that go in, and the more people in a band, we're a 5-piece band most of the history of this band, and the more people, the more intangibles there are, and it's tricky to keep things perfect.
Was Roadrunner happy with the mix on The Law?
No, we had the first mix we turned in, they were definitely thumbs down. It was bad, and half of the guitar tones were so awful, like, because I say half, I mean one guy's tone and the other guy's tone. And one of the guys' tones was so lousy that we had to scratch them completely. But fortunately, what we did was, when each guy was recording, we recorded each guy's tracks through the other guy's tones. So they go through each of their rigs. And that was for purposes of layering and just making it sound bigger and better. So we still had that guy's performance on the other guy's tones, but now we only just had one guitar tone on the album, split left and right. So, and when you start with this band, that's kind of the magic of the guitar tone of Exhorder, is the blend of the guitar sounds makes it sound that much bigger. That was always our big thing. Each guitar tone on its own sounds like it's maybe missing a little something, but when they're together, it's just, wow, just so big. And so there was some resentment within the band that tone had been struck, and but in retrospect, it was the right decision to make, because I went back and listened to it not too long ago on cassette, and it was really, really bad. It just, the frequencies, something about it just kind of killed everything else in the mix.
Yeah.
And so the mix for The Law, again, we just feel like it didn't completely represent what the band was about live.
Yeah.
And we had to learn to live with it. Rob did his very best that he could to make lemonade out of lemons, you know, but
the reason I focus on production quite a bit is because I try and identify trends within Roadrunner in the decision-making processes. When I was speaking to Mike from Defiance last week, he was talking about how Jeff Waters produced the first album. And I spotted that Jeff Waters was also meant to produce Beneath the Remains by Sepultura. But that didn't happen after. Yeah, because I don't know why he pulled out, but we know that the Defiance sessions didn't go too well. So my theory is effectively we're Roadrunner trying to make a thrash factory with Jeff Waters, and they ended up making a death metal factory with Scott Burns, and maybe they were having another shot at it with Rob. You know what I mean? I'm trying to pin those together. That's why
death metal and thrash metal are definitely brothers.
Yeah.
But they're apples and oranges in a lot of ways. So, you know, the thrash beats are there in death metal. You know, a lot of musically, a lot of it's the same, but the real dead ringer identifiability about each that puts one on the left and one on the right is definitely the vocals.
Yeah, completely.
So when we were towards the end of that first that incarnation of the band, where, you know, the Roadrunner years, we were out on tour for The Law in Europe, doing a headliner tour with Channel Zero supporting, and we played a lot of festivals that were mostly death metal festivals. And Channel Zero, neither Channel Zero nor us were death metal, and so, and a lot of we were still kind of a new band in a way because we hadn't really played a lot. So we'd play these festivals, and people would just kind of stand there. And I think when people are just getting exposed to something, they just kind of stand there. Well, some of the guys in the band took that as they weren't getting down the way that they do back home. And they were insulted and offended by it. And there was a lot of there was one show where we almost got into an altercation with the audience over it. And it got bad, and we cut our set short and got on the bus and left immediately. And
we just like, mosh, you bastards.
It was just, you know, it never bothered me that much, but some of the other guys, it did. I don't know why. It just, to me, it was just get out there, do the best I can, and you know, let it stick, and it'll stick. And it did. I mean, that's what it was mostly. I think more than anything, it was just people either didn't know much about us, or they were just kind of like, you know, watching, you know, not usually when people go nuts and they're moshing, it's either because they're familiar with it, or they're just there to mosh. It's one of the two. There are people that don't care what the music is. They just want to get in the pit. And then, like, but I know for me, when I was younger, if there was a band I'd never seen before, I did a lot less moshing because I wanted to see the show. I wanted to see what was going on. So I think that was more the case in the early days. And it has to be, because this band grows exponentially. It's the only, I've said it before, it's the only job I've ever had where I can leave for 7 years, come back and get a pay raise. It's just the way it is. This band gets bigger even when the band's not together. And it's got to have a lot of it has to do with those early shows and those early tours. And, you know, the albums that we for so long looked at as weaknesses and, you know, something to not be satisfied with, to other people, they're iconic cult classic albums. So
that's the word, cult.
The thing with recording as a recording artist is this: you write the songs, they're your songs. You collaborate with the team that you're writing with, and you commit to putting them on to tape, digital, whatever it's going to be, and release it. Once you release it, it no longer belongs to just you. it now belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
So as a result, the way you feel about Slaughter in the Vatican, you have just as much of a right to as I do, because we put it out there for you to purchase and listen to and connect with. So I can't sit there and go, well, I don't care what you think about it because it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter because you're the consumer. You're the music fan. It means it's more, what it means to you is more important than what it means to me now.
Yeah, I mean, the records have life outside of, it's where it's been created, I guess.
Sure.
And that reflects back on its creator in a way.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Frankenstein monster, this Frankenstein had this vision and he builds a monster, and as soon as the monster comes to life, he's like, I hate you. But it doesn't matter. The monster now belongs to the world.
Yeah. So how did your relationship with Roadrunner end with Exhorder?
Badly. Thrash was at the time on its way out. The sales were bad. What happened with Exhorder was we came out not at the beginning of thrash, but because thrash really truly started probably like 82, 83 ish. And we formed the first writings of this band started in late 85. And I was the last piece of the puzzle to join in early 1986. So we weren't a complete unit until 86, but you look back on 86 and, this was right around the time that Slayer was doing Rain and Blood. Dark Angel had done Darkness Descends. There was Exodus was on Bonded by Blood. This was the beginning of thrash. So we were exploding in New Orleans on our scene and writing and recording these demos. The only thing that stopped us from being in that first wave of thrash, I think, or at least the second one, was that we just weren't signed and we were just doing demos, because we were playing, whenever we play a show here in New Orleans, at anywhere from 500 to 700 people showing up. So we were legit. We were doing it for real.
Yeah.
And we just didn't have, at the time there's no internet. So, it's all tape trading and word of mouth. That's a big reason why we ended up getting signed. But it's not like today on, the internet, you can just be in Sweden in 13 seconds, So I really think if we had an album that had come out in the mid-late 80s, that it would have been a much different ball game for this band, because we started recording the album of Slaughter in the Vatican in 1989, and it wasn't released until almost the end of 1990. So at this time, death metal's on the rise. Thrash metal becoming an afterthought. So timing was bad for us. We were there all along. It just didn't work for us.
So did Roadrunner just not pick up on the third option then? Was that the catalyst?
Well, we were starting to record it, but guys were dropping off like flies. And Frankie wasn't in the picture. Vinny wasn't in the picture. It was just me, Jay, Sarabalo, and we had just started working with Jason Vibrooks, who was now our bass player. This is 1993.
Yeah.
And so Chris, Jay, Jason, and I were working. We had about 3 songs we were working on. We were fixing a demo, and it just started falling apart. It just really wasn't going anywhere. And I was increasingly unhappy with the band in general. I was unhappy with it. I was unhappy with the style. I was really wanting to get back into songwriting on my own. And that's when some things happened along the way before Floodgate came around. But but I actually went and auditioned for Corrosion of Conformity.
No way.
In 1993 while they were working on Deliverance. And I was there for maybe a week, 2 weeks, rehearsing on old stuff and demoing new stuff. And you know, as it turned out, I told them when I left, I was like, man, you know, I'm a huge fan of COC. I had been asked to audition for COC before that, back in like '88, but it was around the time Exhorder was getting back together. So I was like, as much as I love you guys, you're one of my favorite bands, I want to put my own thing back together. And this time around, I was like ready to go with them. And some of the band was really, really into the idea of me being there, and others not so much. So I told them the night before I left, I was like, I'd be lying if I said I don't want the job. But at the end of the day, y'all don't need a singer unless you just want a front man, you know, because you look at the old albums, you know, the Animosity, that's all Mike Dean and Reed Mullins singing. You know, there were 3-piece. And that to me that's the album that made me love punk rock. You know, it was the crossover album that made me soften up on punk rock when I was an angry metalhead. And so I just said, y'all, I'm going home tomorrow. Y'all just let me know. And you know, a couple weeks later, I got a phone call from Reed, and he said, yeah, man, we're gonna stick with what we got, but you know, thank you. Thank you for coming.
I never knew that, man. They're one of my favorite bands, and that's probably my favorite album, and what could have been. That's incredible.
Yeah. And there's been a couple of instances between here and there where I've gotten up on stage and jammed with them and sang a song, sang Black Sabbath, or sang like Hungry Child. The last time they came through here, when they were still doing the 3-piece thing about 5 years ago, I got up and did Hungry Child with them, and to me that was just like the highlight of my life, you know.
Yeah, man, probably one of the best gigs I've ever been to is 2016 when COC did the first Deliverance reunion show in Manchester. That was the first one, so no one knew what to expect, but it just fucking brought the house down, man. It was awesome. Really good. Of course. I've already nicked an hour off you, and we've not even got to Floodgate yet.
I've got nothing better to do.
Rock on. So in terms of the dissolution of Exhorder, they clearly dropped you because obviously the band was falling apart and everything was on shaky ground. So what do you do for those 3 years between that and Floodgate?
Well, it wasn't 3 years, because what happened was, as soon as I got home, and I mean the night I got home from the audition with COC, at the time I had moved back in with my parents. I had been living in an apartment on my own, and I had moved back in because there had been talks of Jay Sarablo and I moving out to the San Francisco Bay Area where Jason Bybrooks was living at the time.
Okay.
So we could go start building Exhorder up over there. And some kind of way it was decided that was a good idea. And I really didn't like the idea. I was going to have to go out there and get a job, and all I'd have been doing would have been flipping burgers and never have time to work on music.
Sure.
And I didn't want to do it. And I was increasingly unhappy with the direction the band was going in at the time. And so once the COC thing, I knew it when I came home. I was like, I'm not getting this job. I just knew it. So my brother picked me up from the airport, and I said, and he was living with my parents too. He had just moved back from Austin, Texas. And I was 23. He was about 25. And I said, you know, my brother's a really, really good bass player, and he also plays guitar very well. And I'm a bass player originally as well, and I play guitar. So I looked at him and said, why don't we just start working on music? You know? And I've always wanted to work with you in a band. Let's do it. And so we started immediately, and we would just sit up after the work day, because we worked for our family business. We would sit in either his bedroom or my bedroom at my parents' house with drinks Smoke and guitars, and we would play guitar and bass. Here, you take the guitar, I take the bass. Let's work this part out. Okay, here.
Yeah.
And literally wrote what ended up becoming the very first Penalty demo, which is about 6 songs, I think, most of which ended up on the Floodgate Penalty album. So, yeah, that's how that started. But that was immediate. That was literally like no downtime between leaving Exhorder, auditioning for COC, and starting up Penalty. And so 94 was when we released our first demo. So we worked, this was the tail end of 93. We got a band together, wrote the songs. Jimmy Bauer went into the studio with us and did the Penalty demo. Jimmy and I were in our first 2 bands together. I played bass in one and then sang in the next, and he played drums. So I've been friends with Jimmy since I was 15 and he was 16. And so that was an easy call. And he was like, yeah, it's perfect. He said, because we're about to record the Down album and I need to get my chops back up. So let's work. And so we recorded the 6-song demo, and I started shopping it around, and I had been talking with the first label that came into the picture was might have been Pavement, who had Crowbar at the time. And then like overnight, Dominic DeLuca, that used to be on the Headbangers Ball, as the man on the street, he would go out and interview people on the street. He got in touch with me and he's like, man, I heard the demo, and my buddy Mike Schnapp does A&R over at EMI Records.
Right.
And,
okay.
And I was like, EMI, all I think is major label. What? You know, I was like, all right. He's like, he really likes this demo. He wants to start talking with you. So we were talking with EMI about doing a deal with them. Well, the next thing you know, somewhere along the line, Monty Connor comes in the picture and says, man, I heard the demo from, and actually Borovoy was the one who was passing this demo around to people. Okay. So I, at the time he had just finished doing A&R with Century Media.
Right. Okay.
And I think this was right around the time he was starting to develop blabbermouth.net, because that's his thing. Blabbermouth is his.
That's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. But Borovoy really, really loved the Penalty demo and believes in me, and he just swore up and down. He's like, dude, Roadrunner is your best bet. And I said, hell no. I had a terrible experience with Roadrunner because of Exhorder, you know, because they I can't remember if they dropped us before we broke up and we were shopping around, or we just felt like they never really wanted to give us the tour support we felt we needed. They didn't really put us on the right tours. You know, we felt like we weren't handled properly by Roadrunner with Exhorder. So
it's a common theme with Roadrunner.
Bad experience. No. And why do I want to side with Roadrunner? I've got EMI in my back pocket right now, you know?
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, he's like, look at EMI. He said, what rock and metal bands do you see on their roster? I was like, none really. He goes, exactly. He said, EMI's never been known for that. It's a bad decision, I'm telling you. And I was like, well, maybe we'll be the first one. Who knows? You know, that I didn't want to hear anything about Roadrunner. I just didn't. And then I started talking with Monty, and Monty told me, he said, I am not going to rest until you sign this contract and are convinced that Roadrunner is the right label for you. And I said, got a lot of work to do, Monty. I love you. You know, because Monty actually, Case wanted to drop Exhorder after Slaughter in the Vatican.
Oh, really?
And Monty, it's my understanding that Monty told him, if they go, I go. And so Monty put his neck on the chopping block for us.
Wow.
And Case said, all right. Now, granted, I wasn't there for any of this. This is my understanding of the story. But Case said, all right, you got a second chance with this band. And after things didn't go the way that the label had hoped for The Law, he that's what it was. They did drop us. That's right. Because he said, he called us up and he said, I put my neck on the block for y'all once before, but if I put my neck down one more time, I'm losing my head, and I hate to do this. But, and I don't fault Monty for that one bit. He stood up for us already once, but, a lot of our failures, most of our failures were our own fault. We didn't work hard enough. We turned down tours that were offered to us for, this reason or that. We were problematic. We got kicked off of a tour with Entombed. And
how do you manage that? Is this a story that's been told before? If it is, I'll happily just skip over it. But
I'll give you the short version of it.
Cool.
Basically, it was billed as a co-headliner.
Oh, right.
Which means that we pay for half the tour, but we're opening every night, and Entombed's crew didn't want to work for us.
Mm-hmm.
They felt like they didn't work for us, and we ended up having to be our road crew and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Their management hated us, and we got along fine with the guys in Entombed. I really haven't stayed in touch with any of them, but I loved them. I got along fine with all of them, and most of them were pretty young. Some of them were like only 18 years old, 19 years old.
Sure.
So they were most of them were a little bit younger than us or our age. But the conflict between us and their management complicated things. So we started on the East Coast, came down across the bottom of the states, went over to the West Coast, and we were supposed to double back around and end up again in like New York or Pennsylvania or something. By the time we got to LA, and this is our fault, I always blame it on Dead Horse because they're my friends, and they were complicit in this also. But it's a joke. It was us just as much as anybody. We basically destroyed a backstage room, and I'm not sure who did it, but somebody in our band defecated on a plate. Somebody stuck a fork in it, and they dumped out a silver salad bowl and covered the plate. And as people would enter the room, they would lift and go, pate, pate, pate. And so there was like popcorn ground into the carpet. There was oranges splattered on the wall. It was like we just destroyed everything in this dressing room. And so we got kicked off the tour the next day.
Cool. I can't remember what we were talking about before that. I think we've been sidetracked.
I think we were just. I was getting around to when we got dropped by Roadrunner.
Right.
So yeah,
sure. Yeah.
So I think we were starting to segue into Floodgate, and I kind of went to the back burner onto the Exhorder stuff.
I think you were summarizing the bad experience with Roadrunner previously.
Yes.
The next question would be, so what was the carrot they dangled in front of you for Floodgate?
They gave us a really good offer, and I got a phone call from Dominic DeLuca as we were getting our offer, and he said, guess what? He said, do you remember Fred Davis, who was the vice president of EMI when you were talking with Mike Schnapp over there? I said, yes. I said, if I remember correctly, they did a change of office. They kind of flushed out their administration, and Fred was removed from the vice president position, which had a lot to do with why EMI was no longer interested in us, because Fred was interested in us as vice president, and therefore Mike Schnapp in A&R was talking with us. When Fred was pushed out the door, then EMI was no longer interested in us. So that's when we ended up signing with, starting to talk, getting into serious talks with Roadrunner. And so they gave us an offer, and I was talking with Dominic about Fred Davis. Fred Davis went back to his law firm, because that's what he was, an entertainment lawyer before he was in A&R and vice president of the label, this and that. So Fred Davis is Clive Davis's son. So for those that don't know who Clive Davis is,
yeah,
he's pretty much like the biggest music mogul maybe ever. You know, you got your Phil Spectors, you got your Clive Davises,
Don Ardens, it's up there.
Right. So I hired Fred. I talked to him on the phone, and I hired Fred to negotiate our contract. And I got a phone call from Monty the next day going, "What is this?" I said, "What is what?" And he goes, "This hotshot lawyer." I said, "Well, he's going to negotiate our contract." And he said, "I'm worried that he might screw things up." I said, "I'm not worried he's going to screw anything up." So, it ended up working out really, really great. He took a really good offer from Roadrunner and made it an amazing offer for us. He got our budget for the first album up to like $45,000. Wow. And we had like a $27,000 signing bonus, which was almost unheard of for a brand new band on an independent label. Totally. So it allowed for Penalty at the time, because we were still Penalty. It allowed for us to launch our business. And you know, put a little money in our pockets and, you know, buy real equipment for ourselves. And man, we just came out the gates as professional. It was the first band that I ran. I took a small business management course at the local community college just to learn how to run a business. And the guys in the band were all sensible, responsible. We meant business, and we presented ourselves that way. And that band grew fairly quickly. And the biggest drawback that we had was, but not long before we were going to release the album, Monty called me and said, "We got problems with the trademark for Penalty." I was like, "Right, okay, what's the problem?" He goes, "Well, the biggest problem is y'all don't own it. Second problem is that the company that does own it is out of South America. They make clothing for football, and they are not interested in licensing out the name for you guys to sell Penalty t-shirts on tour."
Yeah, the music industry can't compete with the soccer industry in any.
No. And I was like, "Well, how much did you offer them?" He's like, "Well, we offered them $5,000. I said, offer them 10. And he's like, "That ain't happening." He's like, you got an extra $5,000 in your pocket?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, it's not happening. The label's not going to do it." I said, "Well, we're not changing our name." He goes, "Well, if you don't change your name, then the deal's dead, regrettably." So, okay, all right. So then we started entertaining that. We agonized over that for probably a couple of months, and we finally. And it was Monty that suggested Floodgate, and because we had all voted on a name, I think it was Ashes to Power, and I really liked it. Everybody else really liked it. We included a core of our closest friends to help us vote for a name, and that was the name that everybody came up with. And Monty just didn't care for the name, so then he came back with Floodgate, and that ties in really well with the band. For starters, in the song Imitation Salvation, I talk about floodgates. It's a word, it's a lyric in one of the songs. And floodgates are a big thing here in Greater New Orleans because we're a city that floods, so we have a lot of floodgates. So thematically, it worked. The drawback is, and we had been working at this point, for over 2 years under the name Penalty. So the buzz on this band was Penalty. It was all Penalty. Everybody in the press was looking forward to this Penalty record. So I said, the only way to do damage control on that, I said, we're naming the album Penalty.
Sure.
And he was happily, in agreement with that. But it confused everybody. So nobody had heard of Penalty, Floodgate. Nobody knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I had talked with, I can't remember if it was Catherine Turman or Catherine Ludwig. I used to do interviews with both of them. And one of them told me that they went to a listening party for the Floodgate album, and they were like, well, who is this band? And they were like, well, and then they had it explained to them, like, Penalty, wait, that's the band with Kyle Thomas from Exhorder. Hold on, like, now it's called Floodgate? And they're like, yeah. So I think a lot of the people that were expecting and anticipating the Penalty album just kind of drifted away.
Right. Okay.
And so a very anticipated album now became a confusing problem. And the album just did not do well in the States. Roadrunner they didn't pay for one ad in the United States, I was told. And that's a kiss of death for an album by a brand new band. So basically we never did a proper US tour other than a DIY tour that I booked myself, the best that I could. And we were contacted at the time. Chris Nail from Exhorder, our drummer back then, was managing Floodgate. And he called me one night and said, dude, I got great news. He said, I just heard from Gloria Cavalera that Sepultura wants you guys to replace the Deftones, because the Deftones dropped off of the Roots tour in in Europe. And he's like, they want you guys. I was like, get out of here. That's an arena tour. He's like, exactly. He's like, dude, this is it. Well, I said, call Monty in the morning and get this taken care of. So he got on the phone, and then later on in the day, he got a phone call from Gloria saying, what's going on? I just talked to your guy at the label, and I don't, it wasn't Monty, because Monty doesn't handle that. He just, whoever was in charge of touring at the time. He said, they just called me and are trying to get me to take one of their other bands out. So I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, Sepultura contacts us on an album that just came out that we need to support, that you would think the label would be excited about this. No, they were trying to get another one of their bands on that tour. So I'm livid. I called Monty. I said, dude, I'm done with this label forever if this happens. And Gloria clamped down and said, it's this band or none of your bands. So they gave us the tour support to do the tour. I think that was another confusion thing, because we were still relatively unknown, and Deftones were very well known at the time. So for us to replace a well-known band as an unknown, and we're drastically different from Sepultura musically. So some countries really embraced it and some did not. We had some tough shows. We got spit on, got stuff thrown at us. Sorry, go on. For instance, when we played the UK, we were actually charting in the UK at the time. So it was incredible. Every night, every show was just incredible. We're selling a lot of merch. We step off the bus and there's a line of kids waiting there to meet us and sign stuff. But we get to France or Italy, and the fans were very confrontational, and we're just doing our best to make the best of it. But it was tough. And I think one of the things that was the death knell for Penalty for Floodgate with Roadrunner was my second meeting with Case. He came to the Rotterdam show, and the Rotterdam show was one of the biggest ones. There was about 9,000 people there.
Right. Okay.
And we're playing the show, playing hard, and the floor just didn't give a damn about us. They're flipping us off. We're in the way of them and Sepultura. So but the upper deck was enjoying the show. So we just started focusing on them, and playing the show. Well, this is the first time I've done it. I've never done it since. I said to the crowd that we got one more song, and then the whole place just went. The most applause we got was when we were announcing that we were just about finished. And I think in Case's eyes that night we were finished.
Oh no. Yeah, of
because
course.
he saw it in person, and
yeah.
It didn't matter that the UK shows came after and that things were great. The booking agent that we were using also booked for Korn and Tool, and he told me after the UK leg, he's like, I love you guys. He's like, this is something big. I want you guys to come back and do a 2-week run with Korn and then a 2-week run with Tool, and then I want you to do a headlining residential tour of the UK. Mm-hmm. So we're like, this is it. We made it. We made it. So I got home and I called Monty. Great news. And he was kind of like, okay. And I could tell he wasn't excited. I'm like, what? He goes, Case isn't going to give you the tour support. He said he's done putting any more money into this band, and anything that y'all do from here, you're going to have to do on your own dime.
Shit.
Like, did you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
You know, we can make this. Finally, we're charting in the UK and all these great things are happening. He's like, unless y'all can pay for it, it's not happening. And we couldn't afford it.
So they didn't drop you. They just took all the money away.
They did. And then they were about to drop us. But in Cleveland, Ohio, here in the States, our single Through My Days Into My Nights all of a sudden just became a hit. It was on this FM radio station every night or once a week. I forget what it was. They had a show where this radio station would play, you know, requests, and we were like in the top 10 every night, and we were up there with Metallica, Danzig, all the Marilyn Manson, all the stuff that was big at the time.
Yeah,
and our song was competing in the top 10 every night with them. Mm-hmm. And Monty called me about it. He said, dude, I got to tell you, he said, Case is ready to drop y'all now, but because of this, he wants to see if it's going to catch fire and if it spreads, you know, because that sometimes it happens that way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And as fate would have it, within like the next week, that radio station went out of business. So guess who got dropped the second time from Roadrunner?
Oh, man, that's shit. Especially because it's because you kind of like you shat lightning twice with Roadrunner as well, because you were there for the thrash thing when Monty was on the thrash thing, and then there's this weird phase with Roadrunner in the early 90s where they expand quite exponentially in terms of style. They start getting electronica and industrial imprints and things like that, and trying to respond to grunge. Obviously, Floodgate it tread the line really nicely between that NOLA sound at the time that I hear a bit like Alice in Chains in there, so it was super accessible. And this is a big thing that I heard from Mike from Defiance. You were only 25 at the time, right?
95, I was 25.
Yeah. So you were still in the core demographic of artists that Monty and Case would have been. Yeah.
Yes.
If you'd been 5 years older, it would have been an absolute fucking no go. Apparently.
Yeah, it's the difference between finding new species of dinosaurs and digging up fossils.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is what it is. I you know, I can't say I haven't had my chances in life. That's for sure. I've had a lot of bad breaks. You know, we once we got dropped, we just kept going, and we started demoing songs we were just going to do our second album, you know, just record it on our own and maybe, you know, lease it out to a label for distribution. And I don't know, within a year or two after that, we never, Floodgate never even really broke up. It just kind of stopped. Kind of fizzled away. It's really sad. There were great expectations for them. There's an old saying that was going around the industry that a friend of mine that still worked at Roadrunner told me, that after they signed Nickelback, he said that there was a buzz within the industry that Roadrunner finally figured out what to do with Floodgate.
Oh, man. That's gutting.
So, you know, it is. Yeah. Again, it is what it is. It wasn't long after that I got married and started a family. So I just said, you know, this part of my life has created a lot of heartache for me. Let me go ahead and do the first dream of my life, which was to be a father and have a family. So um, I did go back to touring here and there a little bit throughout my children's early life, but for the most part, I got a 9 to 5, and I was dead. That was it. That was my life.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
But my children are grown now. My youngest will be 18 in January.
That's crazy. Hey, man, you got space to do the 25th anniversary Floodgate tour. That's good news.
That's going to take some work, I'm sure. But it'd be nice. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's another album that's hailed as a classic and a pioneering type album. I've been involved with a lot of bands that are pioneers of this and that. Trouble, Alabama Thunder Pussy. I mean, basically, a lot of my contemporaries tell me, and fans too, they tell me the Floodgate Penalty album was one of the early stoner type albums, you know, groove albums, like you know, I don't know that it was pure stoner, but there really was, stoner wasn't a thing yet. Really, you had bands like Fu Manchu and Caius in the beginning, and we were kind of in that vein. It wasn't really called stoner yet, I don't think, but here we are. Like, I've gotten offers from festivals in Europe, you know, offering really nice guarantees for me to get Floodgate over there, and it's just not feasible right now. So you know, that's happened over the years, not as frequently now that I've got Exhorder and Trouble going. So I guess people just figure I'm too busy, but the demand is there for it. You know, I'm not going to say that if we got back together that we'd be huge or anything, but there's an audience out there for Floodgate. Because, you know, right now in retrospect, it just feels like a dream. It just it happened in a very short number of years, and the promise of it was so big, and I got everything but a guarantee on paper that we would be prioritized by Roadrunner, and at first we kind of were, like, until the album came out. It's like they treated us like we had great press. They hooked me up with all the right press avenues. We were, you know, sometimes on the cover of a magazine or just a full spread. The reviews were excellent. The critics loved the album, and it just, everything was just lined up. And then, you know, for whatever reason, it's kind of like Exhorder. Exhorder was there in the beginning, but by the time it happened for us, it was a little too late. Well, same thing happened for Floodgate, except I think we were a little too early, because at that time new metal was happening. So you had your Corns, your you know, Rage Against the Machine. These bands were all big and exploding, and so I don't know this for sure, but I was told again by another little bluebird within the Roadrunner office that Case told them to discontinue all of our tour support, any kind of money that was going into Floodgate, and direct it into Cold Chamber, because they were a new metal band and that was hitting. So, you know, it worked out for them, you know? But I don't know. It just didn't line up right for us. And I was not taking, I had no interest in taking bad deals for us to get to the next level, because I did it, you know, I saw that it was tough for Exhorder. So I had high expectations for the band. So, like, bad tours with bad slots and bad guarantees where we were going to lose money. I couldn't commit to doing it. We were all in our late 20s and living on our own. We weren't kids at home anymore, you know? So I guess as a result, we the hungrier bands got bigger, you know?
Yeah. Any hard feelings towards Roadrunner?
For a long time, yes. Yes. Not so much anymore, because it's so far back into my past, and definitely not with the majority of the people that I dealt with there.
Sure.
You know, I know Monty did everything he could for us, and like I said, he's a truer friend even than he is an honest businessman, and I love him. I have nothing but respect for him as a businessman as well, and I'm still personal friends with a handful of the people that were on staff back then.
Yeah.
I just don't think they handled. I know we made mistakes along the way, especially in Exhorder. I don't think we really made mistakes with Floodgate, but I think they dropped the ball on us quite a bit, and
missed opportunities.
It you know, I mean, look at Grunt Truck. Grunt Truck was on that label at the heart of the Seattle thing.
Yeah.
And Grunt Truck was as good as any of those other bands from the Seattle scene. In fact, pioneered a lot of the music that came big out of Seattle. And I talked with those guys more than once, and they were just like, this label doesn't know what to do with us, you know? So for all of the all the knowledge and experience and know-how that they had with breaking thrash and death metal, it was really it was the other genres that they were starting to reach out into, that they kind of, I think they just kind of threw things to the wall and see if it stuck. You know, they had Typo Negative under contract, and it was it was told to me that Typo felt like they would have been a lot bigger if they had been on another label. You know, so you know, Roadrunner was very proud of Typo Negative because first gold record, and they did really well. But you know, Typo probably could have been a lot bigger on a major label. They stuck with an independent contract, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking for them, and I probably shouldn't because it's not my place. It's just what I heard. That's all hearsay.
Sure.
So,
but it is interesting because you've kind of like mirrored the narrative that I'm seeing, which is because you want to kind of answer the question of, was this accidental, or was it a really, really clever play by the label throughout all these years to create the absolute monster that it was? And it's so far, it's like such an eclectic mix of both. There are some very well calculated decisions, and there's a lot of just like throw shit at the wall, see what sticks.
At the end of the day, where I am right now, I've got a great relationship with Nuclear Blast. Monty's
is that Monty?
Art.
Who brought you back?
Monty's our guy.
Oof.
Yeah,
that's cool. Isn't it?
So Monty still believes in Exhorder. So that was easy. That was literally like just a handshake, you know, minus the contract negotiation. It was just when we did our first demo of a new Exhorder song, he heard it and said, "I want it. I want it now." So that's where we're at with that. But you know, am I still a little bit bitter about the way things ended up with Roadrunner? You betcha. But do I understand and appreciate all of the hard work that the people that were there, that believed in my bands, and all the sacrifices they made? I couldn't be more grateful to them.
Yeah, man.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I do love how Monty still kept the faith and brought you over to Nuclear Blast. And it paid off because the new album is shit up.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
awesome.
That's another one. We worked really hard on it. And finally, we got an album that represents our live sound and the album that we always dreamed of. So we knew going into making that album what we did not want to do.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, this is the thing about Floodgate, though, isn't it? Because you, like I said earlier, you're only 25 and you fucking cut your teeth on Exhorder. So you knew exactly what the pitfalls were. You knew how to negotiate.
Yes.
Coming out of that was, and they should have really seen you as, and I'm not trying to go back onto like how they dropped the ball, but you were a much more viable asset to the label back then for Floodgate than probably most of the new artists at the time, because you knew how to negotiate. Well, you knew how to navigate those waters. And you knew, and you obviously had a product that they appreciated. So those two things.
We had a product. We had a great band with everybody in the band having vocal capability.
Yep.
and we were all young and good looking. It was
But
perfect, you know.
you did come
For
back
whatever
for
reason.
you came back for Constitution Down though on Roadrunner United, which is an album I love.
Yes, that was Joey Jordison specifically asked Monty to invite me to do that. So
Oh, cool.
yeah,
yeah.
So that really kind of put me back on the map after. I mean, I did a couple of albums before that happened, just locally. One called Jones's Lounge, and another one with a band called Pitts versus Preps. And Jones's Lounge is a little more along the lines of what Floodgate was,
Right.
and Pitts versus Preps was a lot more like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest.
Cool.
But I was a dad at the time. I played a few local shows. We didn't do any touring or anything. I couldn't do it.
Gigs. Yeah.
It wasn't until after Hurricane Katrina, when life presented me with a whole new slate, that I ended up joining Alabama Thunder Pussy and toured with them hard for about 18 months. And we did the Open Fire record, which was highly acclaimed.
2007. Yeah.
Finally got my stuff on MTV, and and then that stopped happening, and Trouble invited me back in the band as a permanent member in 2012. So we're working on new music as well. So
yeah, that's awesome, man. Alabama Thunder Pussy though just has such a special place in my heart. I think it's just like maybe the time I was born into and what I was into at the time, but it's fucking solid album. That is absolutely solid. I'd recommend it to
hardest
everyone.
working band I was ever in. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk to you about that for a million years, but this is a Roadrunner show, so let's not.
Of course.
Maybe another time. So I've got two more questions. In fact, is there anything I've missed? Anything noteworthy about your experience of Roadrunner that I might be interested in? I've got a load.
No. We've gone over the highs and lows with both of those bands. So whatever other questions you got, fire away.
Two silly ones. Have you ever seen a ghost?
Yes.
You're the first person to have seen a ghost that I've asked. Everyone else usually has like a ghost cat or a ghost dog or some strange experiences, but I'm gonna sit back.
Yeah. I've always had kind of a sixth sense where I feel things, and I'm not like a medium or anything, but
Sure.
I just think I'm tuned into that aspect of that dimension. But yes, I actually did. I was visiting my brother and my cousin. They were rooming together one day, and I was checking the oil in my car. It was a beautiful day, sunny, blue skies. Oh, probably about 94, 95.
Cool.
And so I'm looking under my hood at the engine, and in my peripheral vision, I can see the facade of their house and the steps. And as I'm doing what I'm doing, I see like a lady in a white dress with like red hair, fair skin, red hair, like strawberry blonde, start coming down the steps, walking down the walkway towards the car. And as I'm looking, I'm like, I don't remember a girl being here. And I turned to look, and as I'm looking, it's vanishing.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa.
This is down the middle ghost experience, like in white.
Yeah. This isn't, I think I saw something. This is, I saw something. And so immediately I just stopped, and I walked into the house to go be with my brother and my cousin, because I was like, God, it wasn't a fearful thing. It wasn't frightening, but I realized I pretty much think I just saw a ghost.
Yeah.
So I went inside, and I walked in, and my brother and my cousin are sitting on the couch. And as soon as they look at me, I look at them, and they went, "Look how white he is. He's pale. What?" And I just went, I think I just saw a ghost in the front yard. And my cousin and brother look at each other, and one of them just goes, "I told you, man, something's up in this house." So they had been experiencing stuff too.
Yeah.
And I never knew that. I didn't know that they had experienced things, but they said, that particular house, they definitely had more than one experience. And that's not the only experience I've ever had, but that's the only time I can say that I've ever seen a ghost. Yes.
Sure. Awesome. You've over-delivered for me there, Kyle. Thank you very much. Last but not least, I want to bring back tape trading, because it's so hard to find good music in the oversaturated market today. You can go on Spotify, you have to go through all kinds of shite before you get to the good shit. So is there a sort of small band, a local band that you think deserves more attention?
There's a lot of them. New Orleans is definitely always a hotbed for great talent. So
I've got my keyboard ready.
oh, Green Gasoline.
Okay, this sounds good.
Definitely, they're more. They're not like thrash or anything. They're just good heavy rock. Great vocals, great musicianship, really good band. For extreme music, you've got A Hanging.
A Hanging. Yeah.
And Bobby Bergeron from A Hanging was one of the key tape traders here in the history of this area. So that's actually cool if you're talking about legitimate tape trading.
Yeah.
Raise the Death Toll. That's another band. There's also I just had them on the tip of my Six Pack.
Okay.
Wait, I take it back. That's their old name.
Okay.
They are now called Morbid Torment. And they're thrashy kind of band. And I'll spit out a couple more for you also.
Go for it.
Adam Pearce, it's Pearce.
Yep.
And the Warbirds.
Oh, that sounds
Adam
nice.
Pearce and the Warbirds. And that's more like bluesy, heavy rock along the Floodgate Avenue. And the Unnaturals, they're cool. They're kind of like surf punk.
Okay.
Capra, Capra.
Capra.
I think they just got signed to Metal Blade, and they're not from New Orleans, but they're from like the Lafayette area, which isn't far from here. They're from Louisiana.
Yeah.
So that's quite a bit of new music for you to check out.
That's some homework for me, mate. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
tell them I sent you.
Yeah. So for you, I've got 3. In fact, no, let's make it 4. Let's make it fun. So one, a band called Forlorn Hope.
Full on Hope?
No, Forlorn, Forlorn. So forlorn as if
forlorn.
Yeah, like in despair.
Forlorn Hope?
Yes. So they're a Liverpudlian power metal band who sing about the Napoleonic Wars. So if that's the kind of thing, then great. There's one from around me in Leeds called Dream Troll. They're pretty cool. They call themselves keeping the spirit of new wave of British heavy metal alive. I don't.
Oh, cool. Dream. What is it? Dream what?
Troll.
Troll.
Yeah. TROLL.
Dream Troll.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's true though that they're keeping that spirit alive. They're too new school for that. They do sound good, and they sound like a bit like new wave British heavy metal, but they're too innovative to like be burdened with that as a label. Then there's Death Ripper, which is like black metal but rock and roll. I'm full of shit. Hell Ripper. Sorry, one word.
Hell Ripper.
Correct. All one word. And then last but not least, you may have already heard of these guys, Arno Core.
Honor Core?
Arno Core. ARNOCORP. Yeah. So they're just like a hardcore-ish band, that's like a punkish band that just use Arnold Schwarzenegger words for lyrics.
Gotcha. There's one more to add to your list. I'm just remembering. Death Ed.
Death Ed.
ED. Yeah, Death Ed. They're like a rock band with a punk kind of edge. Really good stuff.
Cool. Awesome. There's loads for us to get through now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's it from me, man. Well, thank you very much for joining me and telling me about your Roadrunner stories. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Temple of Blair. Really grateful.
I'll anoint you with the waters of the Temple of Blair. I'll let you know when it's all going in. I don't even